Las Cabo Próximo da Sada na mi canal. You already know it's your boy Hood Diggity, the Rock Reactor, back with another video. Yes, sir. Before I proceed, let me know where you tapping in from. Let me know what country, what city, what mountain, what hill, what cave, what island, what planet, what universe. Let me know where you at. Represent your hood. Svi Luvovi du mojej Ukraini. Stoyashish Bohom Yastoyush Ukrainою. That's right, we got the Kyiv Independent, the Starlink dilemma. Musk cuts the cord. Now, guys, there's a lot of stuff. I got a comment where somebody said you don't understand what's going on as far as how the war is operating, something like that. And no, guys, I do not know. I'm not an expert. I do want to learn. I don't want to sit here and be an idiot, but I do want to learn of a lot of stuff that's going on. I'm just basically a Ukraine lover and a Ukraine supporter and somebody who prays every morning and wants this war to stop. But I don't want the war to stop. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't want the war to stop and have my Ukraine being thrown under the rug. I want it to stop, and I want it to stop where Ukraine keeps their identity, keeps their land, and keeps their sovereignty. Let's get right into this one, guys. And before we do, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell, hit the like button. Any donations to my channel will be greatly appreciated. My PayPal account is on the screen. Keep independent. Let's go.
SpaceX, the American aerospace company that gave the world Starlink, has long positioned itself as a champion of Ukraine's defense. But its role in the war, and particularly that of its founder, Elon Musk, has been mired in controversy. I'm Anna Belliker, reporting to you from Kyiv, and this week we're going to be talking about how both Ukraine and Russia use Starlink, why Kyiv is pushing to limit Moscow's access to the technology, and what risks come with making an ally out of a private company, especially one with as colorful and unpredictable a leader as SpaceX.
I was just about to say that. She read my mind. Elon Musk is very, very, very unpredictable, guys. Very. He's like Trump. Trump is unpredictable also.
Let's go through a few technical details first. What is Starlink? Now, traditional satellite internet connects to a satellite orbiting the Earth at a high altitude. In contrast, Starlink uses a constellation of many satellites at once and sends them into orbit at a much lower altitude, creating a network that supplies faster broadband to a wider geographic range. If you have one of these terminals here on the ground, which are pretty easy to set up, you can get working internet from just about anywhere. The technology is simple, but it can be transformative for remote, rural, or underdeveloped places without a ton of infrastructure, or places that are experiencing some kind of turbulence, like, say, a full-scale invasion by Russia. When Russia began its so-called special military operation on February 24, 2022, its opening strikes targeted telecom infrastructure. Those familiar with the matter say that one of the most immediate concerns for Ukraine was Russia breaking down the chain of command by jamming radios, so an alternative form of communication was urgently needed. 2 days after Russia attacked, then Minister of Digital Transformation and current Defense Minister, Mikhailo Fedorov, tweeted directly at Elon Musk asking him to help. 2 days later, Musk answered that Starlink had been activated over Ukraine, with SpaceX moving quickly to ship terminals over. Within half a year, Starlink terminals were everywhere in Ukraine, being used by the military, humanitarians, hospitals, railways, and general civilians. The simplicity of the terminal to set up, paired with the extensive coverage from the network of satellites, made Starlink versatile and useful, able to both provide internet to a home and navigate a drone. You can imagine the difference in military communications moving from walkie-talkies to commercial smartphones. And their novelty gave Ukraine an advantage. When Starlink appeared on the battlefield, Russia didn't know how to geolocate, jam, or hack into it, and had none of their own. 4 years later, Starlink remains crucial for Ukrainian military communications at many levels, including helping to maintain connectivity for advanced weapons such as heavy bomber drones and ground drones. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Francis Farrell to tell you more.
So whenever you ask a soldier or a commander in Ukraine, and often on the Russian side as well, what is the biggest technological advantage that Ukraine has in this war? Almost every time the answer will be this: Starlink. Over 2024 and 2025, as the drone war expanded at breakneck pace, and with it the effort to develop better jamming and electronic warfare devices, both sides started to also look at Starlink as the best new method of comms to put on drones itself. This goes...
Okay, so he said both sides. I actually thought, because he said first that what is the advantage that Ukraine has over Russia? And that's Starlink, that everybody would say is Starlink. But then he said both sides are using it. So that is confusing me a little bit. So if both sides are using it, because I was going to say, if both sides are using it, then basically Elon Musk and Starlink, they're not supporters of Ukraine. They're basically just businessmen. They're basically just businessmen selling to both sides and don't care who wins the war, what happens in the war. They just want to make money.
For long-range drones in the air, but also for unmanned ground vehicles, which are becoming more and more important on the battlefield. We're here today with Ukraine's 3rd Army Corps at their cutting-edge unmanned ground vehicle school to show you exactly how important Starlink is for keeping Ukrainian forces in the fight on the battlefield today.
Тут у нас представлені роботизовані комплекси під назвою «Терміт». Логістична платформа, але також з можливістю встановлення різних модулів, таких як турель, капсула під евакуацію, модуль мінування, модуль скидання вантажу і тому подібне. Далі у нас представлений, назва по документам КНЛР-Є, але ми його ще називаємо веприком. Це у нас логіст слеш НРК під тактичну евакуацію поранених. До фаркопа кріпиться ноша, туди лягає поранений і вивозиться якраз таки з зони ураження. З часом потреба в збільшенні дистанції росла. Почали придумувати різні способи зв'язку з НРК, прийшли до зв'язку по Starlink, по LTE зв'язку мобільному і по іншим різним альтернативним джерелам. Дивіться, у нас тут представлений набор для встановлення на наземний роботизований комплекс, саме Starlink. Як його встановлюють на НРК? Дуже просто. Беруть тарілку, беруть от такий от короб, зазвичай це броньований короб 4 класу, і беруть радіопрозору кришку. Для чого? Для того, щоб якраз таки нагрів тарілки Starlink не демаскував виріб. Тарілку ми кладемо ось таким чином, закріпляємо її всередині, от такими от кутками.
Наскільки зараз все залежить і тримається на НРК?
Насправді доволі сильно залежить, оскільки ви правильно підмітили, що кілзона вона дедалі більше. Ми не маємо можливості ризикувати життям особового складу на постійній основі. І треба з цим щось робити. І якраз таки НРК чудово з цим справляється.
Now, from this brief overview, the relationship between Ukraine and SpaceX seems charmed. A billionaire heard the call and responded swiftly in a country's darkest hour of need. For nearly 4 years now, his technology in many ways has made it possible for Ukraine to keep fighting. But the reality is actually far more complicated. And in order to understand why, we need to look a little bit more closely at Elon Musk himself. Why was he so initially moved by Ukraine's plight? And why, 4 years later, is he something of a pariah here? Before we move on, I want to quickly thank the viewers and readers who have kept us going this winter. Blackouts, air raids, and all. At the Kyiv Independent, we're a reader-funded news outlet, meaning that shows like this are only made possible by viewers like you. If you'd like to join us and help support independent journalism in Ukraine, there will be a link to our membership page in the description below. I'd also
Yes, guys, make sure you support Kyiv Independent.
like to thank everyone who donates directly via YouTube. Your support goes directly towards producing this show. In case you didn't know, Elon Musk is the wealthiest person in the world, famous for leading companies like Tesla, X, and SpaceX. A common sentiment expressed in interviews throughout his life is that he wants to save humanity, leading him to invest in everything from self-driving cars to colonies on Mars. Although he's often presented as a kooky inventor of sorts, Musk has operated these companies as a ruthless businessman, not a curious engineer. He's undeniably motivated by sweeping narratives of good and evil, but his words and behavior have become so erratic over the years that no one is exactly sure where his allegiances truly lie. Initially, Musk was sympathetic to the Ukrainian cause and got good publicity for providing Starlink. But the narrative became muddier later in 2022, as SpaceX took issue with how and where Starlink terminals were being used by Ukraine. Reporting by CNN and The Wall Street Journal indicated that SpaceX actually turned off Starlink in frontline areas during Ukraine's counteroffensive, a practice known as geofencing. The cuts to service reportedly took place as Ukrainian troops were attempting to encircle Russian troops in Kherson Oblast, part of which Russia still occupies territory in to this day. SpaceX claims that geofencing is an attempt to prevent its technology from being used as a weapon, and that Starlink should only be used for defensive, not offensive maneuvers, no matter whether into Russian territory or Russian-held Ukrainian territory. But their methodology hasn't been straightforward. From February to September of 2022, Starlink...
That is so stupid, guys. That is so stupid. It should only be used for defense. Guys, can someone please tell Elon Musk that this is a full-scale invasion from Russia to Ukraine, and that any attack coming from Ukraine is a defensive tactic? So I just don't understand. This is a full-scale invasion. So how is it that you're going to have your product, okay, you can only use it as a defense tactic? Come on, everything that Ukraine does is protecting themselves. Russia's the aggressor here. This is not a war where we're going back and forth. This is a full-scale invasion.
was active in all regions of Ukraine and played a crucial role in Ukrainian comms during the Battle of Kyiv and the Siege of Mariupol. As the Ukrainian counteroffensive gained momentum, however, Musk reportedly opted instead to have Starlink active only over Ukrainian-controlled territory, as delineated by the front line of fighting at that time, effectively kneecapping Ukraine in the moments its troops crossed.
I want to hear that again, guys. One moment.
As the Ukrainian counteroffensive gained momentum, however, Musk reportedly opted instead to have Starlink active only over Ukrainian-controlled territory, as delineated by the front line of fighting at that time.
There's an agenda. Nobody can tell me that there is an agenda. There is some type of an agenda with him doing that, guys. He's been influenced. He's been advised. There's something behind that we don't know for him to do that, because it doesn't make sense. How are you going to help me, but you're only going to help me over the Ukrainian control, but the Russian control, that's Ukraine's land and they're controlling that, and Ukraine is trying to take it back. So it's all a defensive tactic in this case.
Effectively kneecapping Ukraine in the moments its troops crossed into Russian-occupied territory. The controversy deepened when a 2023 authorized biography of Musk claimed that he had made the active decision to turn off Starlink off the coast of occupied Crimea during a Ukrainian operation there, so as not to involve his company in a global war. This claim was later amended to say that there had never been service over that part of Crimea, and Musk had actually declined to activate it there several weeks earlier when asked by Ukraine to do so. Whatever qualifiers you use, in both the case of the Crimea operation and the geofencing that hindered Ukraine in the counteroffensive, it fell to SpaceX, and thus ultimately to Musk, to set the rules of engagement. These are huge shots on the battlefield being called not by military leaders or even government officials, but by a private individual. A private individual not immune to outside influence, persuasion, and threat. The unease over Musk's influence on the war only grew as Donald Trump returned to the White
Exactly. See, I didn't want to say it, but they said it.
House and gave Musk a role in his new
Outside influence.
government. Musk's tenure was short-lived, but he notably slashed foreign assistance programs that included many vital humanitarian and media initiatives here in Ukraine. Just 4 years ago, Musk positioned himself as one of Ukraine's strongest supporters. But since Trump's re-election in 2024, Musk has amplified conspiracy theories about Ukraine, spoken out against Western military aid, expressed support for far-right movements that align with Russia, and parroted Kremlin demands about how Ukraine should cede its territory. Musk's father told the media that it would be foolish not to admire Russian President Vladimir Putin, who went so far as to offer Musk asylum in Russia last summer after a particularly unhinged fallout with Trump. But as much as Musk takes credit for supplying Starlink to Ukraine, he hasn't been shouldering the costs alone. After Musk stated last March that he could cause the entire front line in Ukraine to collapse if he turned off Starlink, which was effectively threatening Ukraine with ruin as America pressured it to sign the minerals deal, Polish Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski retorted that the Polish Digitization Ministry pays $50 million per year for Starlink for Ukraine, and it would cease doing so if SpaceX proved itself unreliable. When speaking about the technology that makes Starlink so valuable, we also have to address another growing problem. Whether it's by hacking into the signal.
So these are not basically, when it comes to Elon Musk, nothing basically a support. Everything all has to do with his agenda, what basically benefits his company. He thinks from the standpoint of a businessman, even when he is trying to support and end the war and support the war and support this, it's all basically to uplift and market his company. He's a businessman. And you need to be careful with people like that because they are basically, they definitely are very, very, very unpredictable.
Scooping terminals off the battlefield or illegally importing them through proxy countries. Russia has been using Starlink for its own benefit for at least several years, with cases confirmed since 2024. The problem of Russia's use of Starlink has apparently become so acute for Ukraine that last week, Ukraine's Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov again addressed Musk on X to implement a whitelist, a registry of Starlink terminals that would allow only authorized devices to work in Ukraine, and disconnect those being illegally used by Russia. And to explain some more about that, I'm going to need some help from our defense industry reporter, Colin Post. So Colin, can you kind of paint a picture of what the situation is with Russia and Starlink? How many terminals do they have? What are they using them for? Is it getting worse?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will start off by disclosing certain things I do not know, like the specific numbers of terminals that either Ukraine or Russia have. But I mean, for one example, Poland gave Ukraine about 5,000 about a year ago. I mean, they get destroyed, but we are talking many thousands of Starlink terminals that Ukraine has. Russia, we don't have quite the same figures because they've had to sneak them all in, right? Formally, Starlink doesn't operate inside of Russia. The satellite signals don't work inside of Russia. They do, however, connect within some of the occupied territories, and they certainly connect within Ukraine itself. So sort of the dispute right now, initial area where Ukraine identified Russia as using Starlink terminals was with...
So they actually operate through the occupied Ukraine territory. And I'm sure that Elon Musk and Starlink knows this.
Long-range drone strikes. A Shahhed drone lost contact with its operators pretty quickly after, leaving the Russian border, right? With the Starlink, it would maintain some level of contact. I mean, Russia also used Ukrainian SIM cards to do something similar, but at a lower bandwidth. That was the first area where Ukraine was highlighting that Russia seemed to be getting Starlink terminals. More recently, they've been talking about Russian soldiers using them in frontline positions. And that is, I suppose, what the recent announcement is putting to the test, how much these people had become dependent in the same way that Ukrainian soldiers had been using Starlink for most of their internet needs.
Can you explain a little about the whitelist? Sort of what is it? I know it's already starting to be rolled out, but kind of can you explain how that is intended to work?
In keeping with this idea that these Russian-owned Starlink terminals seem to be operating within Ukrainian territory or temporarily occupied territory, right? The solution that the new Minister of Defense presented was, hey, we are going to put everybody on lists. We're going to use a couple of different applications, one for the military uses, one for the civilian uses. I mean, there's DIA. So I suppose to back up a little bit to give more on this guy's background, Mikhailo Fedorov recently moved from the Ministry of Digital Transformation to being the Minister of Defense. But at the Ministry of Digital Transformation, his crowning achievement was this application DIA, which kept all sort of Ukrainian passports, licensing, vehicle ownership, property, all that stuff was registered in this one application, right? He's basically applying that principle to Starlinks. So everybody has to be registered in order to use their Starlink within the territory of Ukraine. Apparently, Elon Musk is on board with this. Fedorov seems to have a much better relationship with Elon Musk than any of his predecessors have had. So currently, we are actually watching in real time as unregistered terminals, those not on the whitelist, right? The whitelist is strictly just being registered. So those terminals that are off of that whitelist are being disconnected in real time.
And can you maybe say something about the headline today about it being catastrophic for Russia?
The total impact we're aggregating right now. I suppose when this episode airs, we should know a little bit more. But just based on reports from the front line here, various Russian Telegram channels, other social media, it does seem to be hitting the Russian front line pretty quickly. There are already units, particularly assault units within Ukrainian territory, that had been using these, Starlink terminals as their way of connecting with the outside world, which is especially interesting because less than a year ago, I think 9 months ago, there was this big fear within Ukraine that Elon Musk had threatened to cut off terminal access to Ukrainians, and everybody was suddenly weighing what sort of alternatives exist, and they're kind of limited. If you want high definition bandwidth at the front lines, the Starlink terminals have maintained that in a way that nothing else seems to.
Could there be any unforeseen side effects for Ukraine with this whitelist? Could it have a negative impact?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. We are already seeing a few Ukrainians are also complaining of suddenly not having access to their terminals, this internet that they had become reliant upon. They should be able to register, right? But there are concerns that are somewhat parallel to the historical concerns about this DIA application. That is, if you centralize this much information that is obviously critical to military infrastructure, anytime you have that kind of centralized point of failure, you are at risk of something else catastrophic happening. So right now, in theory, all these people who are getting disconnected, you would imagine they'd have some way of registering. But say, for example, you have foreign nationals, you have international units, they might not necessarily be able to access the applications they need to, the registration portals that they need to. This could prove problematic to them. Obviously, that could get resolved, but the idea of somehow somebody hacking this entire base and somehow moving it from the whitelist to the blacklist, that's a sort of nightmare scenario if you have this sort of centralized pool of data. As it stands, that's somewhat catastrophizing, but that would be, I think, the more long-term concern rather than now this delay of registering everybody.
And just to be clear, how is Russia getting these terminals? What are the common ways that they're coming by them?
So Russia's pretty good at getting around sanctions in general. It's third-party countries, importers probably based in Kazakhstan, Armenia, wherever else. The Ukrainian intelligence agencies have said that China is playing a major role in shipping en masse Starlink terminals into Russia, which then end up at the front line. There's no real civilian use of Starlinks within Russia itself. These aren't, going to Panelki and Reactor. These are bound for the front line in almost all cases.
Crazy.
It's too early to know how effective this plan will be at stopping Russia from appropriating Starlink in the long run. Although early reports, as Colin said, indicate promising outages along the Russian side of the front line, which have been described as catastrophic in scale. Russian media also had some choice words.
Давайте скажем правду. Что такое Starlink? Это милитаризация космоса, потому что все, над чем работал Маск, все, что мы видим сейчас, работает в интересах войны против России. Поэтому я не понимаю, почему, например, спутники Илона Маска не являются для нас законной целью. Один подрыв ядерного оружия в космосе, как я понимаю, довольно серьезно решает эту проблему.
We'll see how quickly Russia is able to fill the void left by Starlink, as well as how much of a problem it will pose to Ukrainian users who may struggle to complete the verification process, which all of them will need to do in order to keep using their terminals, no matter the circumstances. At what point does the company say that everyone has had a fair chance to register their terminal and turn the rest off? We can see in Defense Minister Fedorov's messaging that he's taking ownership of the decision to institute the whitelist, rather than placing it on SpaceX as a matter of corporate responsibility. A diplomatic move in a relationship that's been increasingly strained over the last few years. Fedorov claims that the first round of verifications has been successful. We spoke to a vendor here in Kyiv that provides Starlink modification services to find out more.
Термінали Starlink працюють в межах адміністративного кордону України. Тобто туди входить тимчасово окуповані території, туди входить Крим. І коли в якийсь момент росіяни дізналися про те, що вони можуть активувати термінал Starlink на підконтрольній їм тимчасово території, то вони почали цим користуватися. Держава зробила правильний крок на цьому етапі верифікації старлінків, що це саме старлінки, які знаходяться на підконтрольній території України і що вони належать українцям. Прямо зараз весь фронт зі сторони противника стоїть, вони їм відключили всі технології, і це супер результат, я вважаю. В Україні теж є ряд проблем з старлінками, які не попали в білий список, але порівняно з тим внеском, який робиться прямо зараз на рахунок ворога, це незначні втрати, можна сказати. Там є обмеження, що одна людина може зареєструвати максимум 3 термінали Starlink, і вона має їх показати фізично. А юридичні особи, в залежності від їхнього статусу критичності, можуть зареєструвати в середньому до 10 терміналів Starlink. Ну і плюс є вже система Дельта, це вже військова історія, і там реєстрація відбувається взагалі на іншому рівні, набагато швидше, набагато якісніше. А уже вчора, приблизно з 6-ї вечора, почалися масові відключення. І всі, у кого були термінали Starlink, всі, хто хотів почекати, всім прийшло повідомлення про те, що ваш термінал Starlink обмежено і аккаунт деактивований. З 23-го року ми займаємось тим, що адаптовуємо термінали Starlink для використання на транспортних засобах. Тут уже всередині встановлений термінал Starlink, він захищений, він встановлюється дуже швидко, його важко відірвати від поверхні. І саме тому навіть при дуже великих швидкостях, коли нашим воїнам потрібно дуже швидко покинути позицію, поїхати бездоріжжям або якоюсь трасою дуже швидко проїхати, то він не відвалюється. І це наш ключовий зараз продукт. Ось так воно виглядає на машині. Все, Starlink працює, його неможливо відірвати.
Спочатку Starlink запустив обмеження швидкості 25 метрів за секунду. Це була перша така градація обмежень для того, щоб виключити можливість використання Starlinkів у противників на безпілотних літальних апаратах. Потім це поширилися чутки, ніби були спроби, що літати на більш низькій швидкості, і Starlink зменшив ще цю швидкість, там орієнтовно до 75 км на годину. Спробувати якісь інші варіанти обмежень було як першочерговою мірою неможливо, тому що так само і наші використовують.
What I'm wondering is how long is this going to last before Elon Musk turns the tables and decide he wants to be pro-Russia now?
Збройні сили, Старлінки на дронах, літальних апаратах, так. Тому потрібна була верифікація, якісь подальші дії, окрім обмеження швидкості, безперечно.
Practically speaking, Ukraine is going to need Starlink for the foreseeable future. It was not a one-time helper in the early days of the invasion. Its usage has only expanded since. Even though China and Amazon, and it is odd to name those like two equal superpowers, are working on their own versions of the low-altitude satellite constellation, there isn't an immediate alternative, and for better or worse, Starlink has already been distributed widely in Ukraine in a way that isn't likely to be replicated by a competitor anytime soon. The question of whether it's in Ukraine's best interest to rely on SpaceX or to trust Elon Musk is moot at a certain point. Ukraine can't divorce itself from the risks, but it can try to mitigate them. The influence over geopolitics afforded to Musk by his wealth might seem unprecedented, but in many ways, he's carrying on a tradition. The ultra-rich have always tried to influence the battlefield. If John D. Rockefeller understood that World War I was fueled by oil, Musk understands that this war is fueled by broadband. But although Musk's role in war may fit old tropes, that's not to say that any of this is normal. Musk is not a distant financer like Rockefeller or an engineer quietly working behind the scenes Oppenheimer style. He's now an ex-government official and an extremely online billionaire who owns one of the largest social media networks in the world where he regularly promotes factually untrue information and hate speech. His political views most closely align with the alt-right, but have fluctuated across the entire spectrum throughout his career. His willingness to spread misinformation and conspiracy, including about Ukraine, makes him a uniquely unnerving ally. In a few weeks, it's going to be the 4-year anniversary of Starlink being activated over Ukraine. And to reiterate, for many, this service has been a lifeline that's never been in dispute. The issue lies in the fact that that lifeline comes at the discretion of one corporation, and by extension, one man, who has proven himself to be firmly on no one's side but his own. An unreliable ally is something Ukraine can't afford, meaning that until a truly viable alternative to Starlink emerges, we remain between a rock and a hard place.
Yup, I was just about to say that.
Hi, I'm Katerina Denisova, a Kyiv independent reporter with the National Desk. Over the past week, we received multiple questions from our members, so I'm here to answer one of them. The question is from our member von Rage. I would be curious to know what Ukrainians think about reclaiming their lost territory if a peace agreement were to be agreed upon. Is there a national resolve to prepare for a future confrontation to reclaim their land? Or is there the idea that once it's lost, it's just gone if the war ends? I can't imagine that the hatred built up towards the Russians would not result in the future conflict. But I'm sitting over here in America and don't know the pulse of the people. The issue of Ukrainian territories occupied by Russia remains the most difficult and painful one. But I can say with certainty that, in my opinion, neither Ukrainians nor Ukraine as a state will recognize the occupied territories as Russian, even under pressure. According to recent polls, over 50% of Ukrainians are against any territorial concessions. Compared to the first years of the full-scale war, many Ukrainians have lost the illusion that it will be possible to quickly return to the borders of 1991.
That's going to be a very, very, very hard one for Ukrainians to regain their territory. Not impossible, but it's going to be a hard one, especially because of the negotiators involved. Especially. And I'm going to say this, that is going to eventually, if Ukrainians don't regain that territory, which is unlikely, but if they don't, at the end, that's something that is going to hurt probably the rest of Europe and eventually the rest of the world, because that's going to strengthen Russia. That's going to strengthen Russia into making their next move in their next invasion. Because I am a firm believer that this is not going to stop in Ukraine.
And liberate the occupied territories. But I think that Ukrainians still want the justice. And of course, the desire to regain occupied territories will remain. And this is healthy rage, and this is absolutely justified. But how this can be done will be decided by the elected president. And previously, President Zelensky said that this can be done either by diplomatic or military means. As for the second option, Ukraine lacks manpower, weapons, and this choice would mean human losses. So I think that Ukrainians must build up their own army, weapons to count on themselves, to be in strong position to hold such potential negotiations regarding the occupied territories in the future. And the West, in turn, should not forget about the occupied territories in Ukraine and turn a blind eye, since the next occupied territories by Russia can be on the territory of NATO.
That's all for this week.
That's
We'll be back
exactly
next
right.
Sunday with more news from you.
That is exactly right. Should not be confessed, because the next territory should be a NATO territory. She definitely was right. Something else I wanted to say about Elon Musk is that one single man shouldn't have so much power over the world, over something so important. One single man's decision, just one single person to have so much control over, especially over the lives of so many people, is something that needs to be looked at, guys. No matter how smart and how much he has achieved, I think there should be some type of regulation over how much control he actually has. Guys, you already know, man. Subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell, hit the like button. Any donations to my channel will be greatly appreciated. My PayPal account is on the screen. I will continue to pray for my Ukraine every morning. I wish you guys the best. Slava Ukraini. Peace, love, and God bless.